and support functions. But sales and support isn't necessarily kind of aligned around those same kind of business objectives as to the why, the rationale. So one of the things we see is this kind of continuous tug of war that you know, in a lot of ways, organizations can become their own worst enemy if they can't start to establish some type of alignment throughout leadership within the organization. So again, we're going to ask you to kind of give us your feedback in this regard. If you're understanding kind of where we're going with this concept, you know, how have you been able to get and maintain leadership alignment with any of the initiatives that you have seen or dealt specifically with? In other words, how have you been able to look at this problem and say, hey, if my organization's split up and we're not thinking, you know, if we're not understanding what the kind of the end goal is and being in alignment with it, we're never going to, you know, kind of deliver. So are there any thoughts that you might all have around this as far as things that you've been able to do that were successful?
Yeah, Dave, here's a couple good ones. Paul says promoting clear benefits for leaders and their teams. So really identifying what are the benefits for each organization involved in that change. Liz has an interesting one as well as far as getting buy-in from the organization's cheerleaders so they can help to motivate others.
Yeah, it's you know, telling the story. It's a great way to say that, Liz. In other words, if you don't have a good story to tell, you know, often people aren't going to listen for sure. Again,
yeah, here's a good one from Mary.
Focus on adding value to the company.
Yeah, Mary has a good one here as far as telling stories and using those stories as a way to sell the value to the organization.
Again, some other great things, you know, a formal project portfolio management process, you know, so if you have a project management office where, again, you know, if we look at it as kind of a central clearinghouse for all projects to make sure, again, that there's alignment with them in the organization, that everybody understands that alignment, it's a lot easier to kind of get behind it. So, again, some really great concepts there. So, again, from our point of view, you know, there's some great things that can be done, and you know, some things that we found to be enormously successful is even just starting to make sure early on in a project you create even a charter around the project where you can kind of make sure that with key stakeholders, and we're going to talk a lot about stakeholders in a little bit, but key stakeholders are involved with kind of coming up with our, you know, kind of what. Really framing clearly what the project win looks like, coming up with the aspects of, you know, what is the vision for it, what's the action plan, outlining the key milestones. You know, it's all about, you know, 4 or 5 of you have used the word story in your comments so far, and it's really interesting because it's having the right story. It's kind of, if you can, boiling it down to a one-pager that can really articulate well how the initiative is going to make a difference in the organization and help you meet those business goals. So again, a lot of really great ideas, and we were strongly recommending that you have to really work to make sure that you do get that story and that you start to be good storytellers in moving that through the organization. Along those lines, you know, a specific technique that we've utilized is really kind of coming up with this concept of what we call a readiness presentation. And a readiness presentation can take a lot of different forms, but you really wanted to answer a number of questions that help individuals triangulate, well, what the current as-is state is, what are the business needs, again, what's the alignment, what's the story, and then what's the desired end state, the to-be state, and to really say, all right, you know, if we can really articulate that well, you know, we have a much higher probability for success. So, again, in larger organizations, we have helped to even kind of formalize this in a presentation that could be set up on an intranet or even sent out as a link in an email blast that answers kind of those key questions and does it in a very clear and well-articulated message. These do not have to be big or long or very expensive to produce. You know, there's a lot of ways to produce these relatively inexpensively. But you really kind of need to be able to boil that story down into maybe anywhere from a 5 to, I would say, on the long end, 15-minute presentation that can be sent out early on to the masses to really start the whole buy-in and alignment process. And we're going to talk about communication strategy in a little bit, but a really important aspect of telling the story is making sure that you have a mechanism in place so that you can bring feedback back into like your core project team to allow you to know where adjustments should be made along the way to actually really kind of addressing the concerns of your constituency. So, alignment really, really important, and we talked about leadership